Hey everyone, and welcome to Drive Steady. In this video we're comparing two of the biggest names in the performance car world, the Corvette and the Shelby GT500. Both the C8 Corvette and the Shelby GT500 media embargoes were removed recently, and there's a slew of information available, so let's look at the numbers. In this video we're going to look at how these two cars match up on paper by analyzing horsepower, torque, 0 to 60 pricing, and much more. So if the mid-engine Corvette or the Shelby GT500 get you excited, stick around for the rest of the video. Before getting started, a big thank you to all who watch our videos and subscribe to our channel. If you're interested in other comparison videos like this one, check out our channel page for more videos and other car reviews. If you have any suggestions for cars that you would like compared or reviewed, please send us a comment below and we'd be happy to put a video together. So I'm kind of excited about this comparison, as the C8 Corvette and the Shelby GT500 are probably two of the gotta have it sports cars out there now, but let's talk about them a little bit here before getting started with the comparison. The Corvette is America's sports car, and it's been around since 1953, with the debut of the C1 generation making the Corvette name 66 years old. The Shelby name goes all the way back into the 60s with Carroll Shelby Racing, but the first Shelby car was the GT350, which debuted in 1965. It wasn't until 1967 when Carroll Shelby and Ford introduced the top dog GT500. So if my math is correct, the Shelby GT500 name is 52 years old. Fast forward to today, the 2020 Corvette has moved to a mid-engine platform, and the 2020 Shelby GT500 has close to 800 horsepower from the factory. It's such a great time to be a car enthusiast, isn't it? So that's your quick intro. Now let's set the ground rules for the comparison. To keep it simple, I typically take the base model trim for each of these cars, but since both of them have cool track packages, in the Corvette it's the Z51 and in the GT500 it's the track package, I may sprinkle in some performance numbers for those higher performance options. First topic, engine, horsepower, and torque. Starting off with the C8 Corvette, it comes with a 6.2-liter naturally aspirated V8 engine, producing 490 horsepower and 465 foot-pounds of torque. On the flip side, the 2020 Shelby GT500 engine comes in at 5.2 liters of double overhead cam 32-valve supercharged V8 goodness, producing 760 horsepower and 625 foot-pounds of torque. One hot topic I read about in Motor Trend a couple weeks ago was how Corvette was severely underrated from the factory. They threw it on the dyno, and after several runs it was putting out about 560 horsepower and 630 foot-pounds of torque. Now that's a pretty big discrepancy between what Chevrolet is advertising versus the Motor Trend dyno, but I wouldn't be surprised if the C8 Corvette did make more than the 490 it's advertised, but not that much more. Typically the margin for error on dynos is about 2%, but overall I don't read much into dyno numbers. It was just interesting. Getting back to the numbers, the difference in horsepower and torque between these two cars is truly eye-popping. The Shelby GT500 has 270 horsepower and 160 foot-pounds of torque advantage over the C8 Corvette. Moving to the transmissions, both of these cars are changing direction. Traditionally, the GT500 was a manual transmission only car, and the Corvette was offered in a manual and an automatic. In their newest forms, both of these cars are only offered with double clutch transmissions. 7 speeds in the GT500 double clutch, 8 speeds in the C8 Corvettes. After sitting in the Corvette, I don't think there's enough room in the center console for a manual, so I've given up hope there. However, I still have a hunch that Ford is going to make a GT500 KR with a manual. How many of you want Ford to build a Shelby GT500 with a manual transmission? So send us a comment down below. Since these cars have been around for such a long time, let's look at the history charts going back all the way to the beginning. Starting off in the Corvette, it starts out with 150 horsepower and 223 foot-pounds of torque from a 6-cylinder. As a reminder, the Corvette didn't go to an 8-cylinder till the 1955 model year. The Corvette sees big jumps from year to year early on in its life cycle, but then suffered between the late 70s and early 80s because of the oil and economic crisis, but has now bounced back with decent horsepower ratings given its weight. From its inception in 1953 to the current 2020 model, the Corvette has increased its base horsepower by 226% or 340 horsepower. Now let's look at the Shelby GT500. Officially, the Shelby GT500 has been produced in 3 Mustang generations: the first generation, 5th generation, and finally the current 6th generation. If you're a GT500 fan, you know that in between those years, several big upgrades were applied to the GT500. Those notable years are highlighted here with the 68 KR standing for King of the Road, the 2011 GT500, and one of my favorites, the 2013 model with 662 horsepower. I remember when the 2013 GT500 news came out. It was right after Chevrolet had announced the 5th generation ZL1 would get 580 horsepower, and when Ford announced the GT500 would get 662, everybody went nuts. I believe it was touted as the most powerful production V8 engine at the time. From its inception in 1967 through the current 2020 model year, the Shelby GT500 has increased its base horsepower by 114% or 405 horsepower. Next, let's look at the ever popular 0 to 60 time. In the C8 Corvette, 60 is attained in 3 seconds flat. The Shelby GT350 with the track pack gets to 60 in 3.3 seconds. I couldn't find anything for a base level Shelby GT500, so the 3.3 second time is a car equipped with the track package. If you're wondering how these cars are able to get such low 0 to 60 times, in the Shelby it's the combination of the huge power, and an even bigger impact is from the double clutch transmission. When you've got lightning fast shifts, the power is always on or building, and that helps shave ticks off of a 0 to 60 time. On the flip side, the C8 Corvette is the same. It uses its 8-speed double clutch transmission to attain a blistering 0 to 60 time of 3 seconds, but it also takes advantage of aggressively tuned gear ratios. Another item could be that the engine is truly underrated in the C8 Corvette. But anyway, the Corvette bests the Shelby GT500 in the 0 to 60 category by a narrow 0.3 seconds. Next, let's talk about the topic that everybody loves to complain about, and that's curb weight. The Corvette in its base trim comes in at 3,535 pounds. On the flip side, the Shelby GT500 comes in at 4,183 pounds. Remember how there was a big power difference between these two cars in favor of the GT500? Well, now it's the Corvette's turn because the C8 Corvette weighs a staggering 648 pounds less than the GT500. Yes, I know the GT500 has extra seats. It's not really an apples to apples comparison. Yes, I get all that, but we're comparing these cars, so it is what it is. It's very interesting how much weight the GT500 gains over a GT350R, for example, which comes in around 3,700 pounds. Like I mentioned, weight is typically the biggest complaint for all car enthusiasts, especially in the past 10 years, and generally the GT500 has been a heavier car whose philosophy is to counterbalance the extra weight with a lot more horsepower. The nice thing about this new 2020 GT500 is that even though it's heavy, Ford is making an effort with the track package to make it handle or be a little bit more balanced. Now let's look at the history of curb weight. First, let's take a look at the Corvette's weight chart. I was really surprised to see that the Corvette has gained little weight throughout its life cycle. As a matter of fact, the biggest weight gain was from the C2 generation to the C3 generation at 6.5% increase between the two. In fact, a couple years, the Corvette has lost some weight from the previous generation. The biggest dip in weight was going from C5 to the C6, where the new generation lost almost 40 pounds compared to the previous generation. Looking at the overall picture, the total weight gain from the first model year of the Corvette in 1953 to the new mid-engine C8 2020 model is 550 pounds. Now let's look at the Shelby. It's interesting to see that the 68 KR was 200 pounds heavier than the regular GT500. I wonder how much of that extra weight was contributed to the extra beef in that engine. Like the Corvette, the Shelby GT500 was able to lose some weight throughout its life cycle. As I mentioned earlier, the GT500 went through several improvements in its second go-around from 2007 through 2013. In the 2011 model, the weight dropped over 100 pounds because Ford decided to switch the block from cast iron to aluminum. Then from 2011 to 2013, the weight only increased by 1%. And remember the power chart earlier where the GT500 went up 20% in horsepower over the same period of time. I think that's a good equation, isn't it? 1% gain against a 20 horsepower gain. I'll take that all day. Last item for the GT500. Look at the weight gain from 2013 to the 2020 model. It's 8%. That's nearly as much gain from the early 68 KR model to the modern 2007 model. No matter how you slice it, guys, it's a lot. This is another reason why I think Ford still has a KR card up its sleeve. It seems like there's an opportunity for the 2020 GT500 to lose some weight. What do you think? Will Ford make the GT500 KR? Alright, now let's look at the power to weight ratio of these cars. I'm not sure why power to weight isn't more advertised, as it's a great metric that typically translates to performance. Anyway, this number is attained by dividing the car's horsepower by the weight to give you the horsepower per 10 pounds. The higher the number, the better the car will perform. In the Corvette, you take 490 horsepower and divide it by 3,535 pounds and you get 1.38. In the Shelby, you take 760 horsepower and divide it by 4,183 pounds and you get a monstrous 1.81. The difference between these two cars is a staggering 0.43. For reference, the new 992 generation Porsche 911 Carrera S is much closer to the Corvette at 1.3. Now, the inverse of power to weight is weight to power ratio. This metric shows how much weight each horsepower is pulling. The lower the number, the better the car will perform. In the Corvette, you take 3,535 pounds and divide it by 490 horsepower, you get 7.2 pounds per horsepower. In the Shelby, you take 4,183 and divide it by 760 horsepower, and you get 5.5 pounds per horsepower. For reference, the Lamborghini Huracan LP610 has a weight to power ratio of 5.6. It's pretty eye-popping numbers in the GT500, right? It bests the Corvette in this category as well. Not surprising that the GT500 takes these two categories because of the amount of horsepower that 5.2-liter engine. This next category should be easy to predict. It's horsepower per dollar. This metric is calculated by taking the price of the car and dividing it by the horsepower. In the C8, you take $59,995 and you divide it by 490 horsepower. And from there, you get a horsepower cost of $122.43 in the new C8 Corvette. The Shelby GT500, you take $73,995 and you divide that by 760, you get $97.36. The Corvette costs $25.07 more per horsepower than the Shelby GT500. As I mentioned, I'm not surprised that the GT500 offers more horsepower per dollar. However, the more interesting thing here is it shows you how much of a bargain, horsepower-wise of course, the GT500 really is. And here's another thing. I know that there's a lot of people out there complaining about the $18,500 track pack in the GT500. Check this one out. Even if you add the track package on top of the base GT500, the horsepower per dollar is still better than the Corvette at $121.70. If you're after horsepower and want the most value with respects to horsepower, the Shelby is the clear-cut favorite. Next, let's look at the quarter mile. The Corvette runs it in 11.3 seconds at 123 miles per hour. On the flip side, Ford claims 10.7 seconds but doesn't report a trap speed, so I'm going with a nice round 130 miles per hour based off of what I've seen so far. Now, these numbers are published numbers from the manufacturers. I have seen better numbers from independent magazines such as Car and Driver, who ran the Corvette a tick faster at 11.2 seconds, and a YouTuber ran a GT500 in 10.6 seconds. So better numbers will be available in both cars. Looking at the official numbers, the Shelby takes the cake with a 0.6 second trap time and 7 miles per hour faster in the trap speed department. The next topic is top speed. In the base version, the Corvette rushes to a top speed of 193 miles per hour, which is pretty impressive for the base level car. On the flip side is a controversial topic because Ford has decided that the 2020 Shelby GT500 will be electronically limited to 180 miles per hour. It's interesting because surely 760 horsepower in the Shelby will be able to push well beyond 180 miles per hour, but it goes to show you that top speed isn't really important anymore. Unless you're going for the world record, who really cares? Regardless, I'm sure the 2020 GT500 is more than capable of hitting 200 miles per hour, considering that the 2013 Shelby GT500 with less horsepower at 662 was rated at 200 plus miles per hour. Next, let's look at the exterior dimensions. Here is where we see the argument for this is not really an apples to apples comparison because the Corvette is a dedicated two-seater sports car and the GT500 is still a sports car but has back seats and a big trunk, etc., etc. So let's look into this. The Corvette measures overall 182.3 inches, the GT500 90.2. The C8's width without the mirrors 76.1, GT500 76.6. The overall height in the Corvette 48.6, GT500 54.3. C8 wheelbase 107.2, GT500 wheelbase 107 even. And then the front track in the C8 64.9 versus the Shelby 63.3. Rear track 62.4 in the Corvette, 63.6 in the Shelby. So let's take a look at these numbers a little closer. Predictably, the GT500 is a bigger car. It's longer, wider, and taller than the Corvette. The wheelbase is practically the same for the Corvette and the Shelby. Interestingly, even though the GT500 is wider than the Corvette, the front track of the C8 is wider by more than 1.5 inches, but the rear track in the GT500 is wider by an inch. It just goes to show you the different philosophies in these cars. The Shelby needs more rear track so it can get as much grip as possible to handle that 760 horsepower. And on the flip side, the benefit of having the engine in the back for the C8 Corvette is that it provides grip by adding weight over the rear tires and reduces the need for a wider track in the rear. We just talked about the exterior dimensions, now let's talk interior. The interior is important because a lot of people use the Corvette as an all-around car, and same goes for the GT500. Additionally, most manufacturers develop these cars to be all-purpose for daily driving. That's why you see magnetic shocks and electronic power steering to allow for more adjustability and comfort. So the Shelby GT500 dimensions are straight out of a Mustang, and obviously the Corvette has no rear seats, so you won't see any metrics for it besides the front. Unsurprisingly, the GT500 wins in all categories but one, and that's headroom. This is interesting because I remember when the mid-engine C8 Corvette came out, there was a lot of concern on if taller individuals would be able to fit in it. I went to one of the events where the Corvette was on display and I noticed several tall individuals around the 6'4" body frame sit very comfortably in the C8 Corvette. I think this headroom stat further proves that taller individuals can indeed fit in the new Corvette. So if you can fit in a Mustang, you'll most probably fit in a Corvette too. Alright, now we're going to talk about cargo space because you still need to carry stuff in your car, right? Even if it has 760 horsepower. Even though the Corvette is now a mid-engine car, and typically what that means is you lose the trunk, but not in the Corvette. You get a trunk and a frunk, which when combined gives you 12.6 cubic feet of cargo space. On the flip side, the GT500 offers 13.5 cubic feet of cargo space. The difference here is 0.9 cubic feet. For reference, a standard carry-on bag takes up to 1.43 cubic feet of cargo space. So the difference here isn't even the size of a carry-on bag. It's not really important to me, but I know a lot of people in the Corvette community care about this stuff. Okay, now we talked about all the specs, now let's talk pricing. The C8 Corvette in its base trim comes in at $59,995, which includes destination and handling. On the flip side, the GT500 comes in at $73,995, which again includes destination and handling. The price difference between these two cars comes in at an even $14,000. Granted, we are comparing the base level C8 Corvette to the top of the line specialty Mustang, so it isn't really a fair comparison. However, it shouldn't be overlooked the performance the base level Corvette offers for its price. One other thing I wanted to point out is that just for fun, I went through and configured a GT500 and Corvette to their most expensive specifications. In the GT500, I was able to spec it all the way up to $106,385. So if my math is correct, that's $32,390 in options. In the Corvette, I was able to get it up to $109,225, which equates to $49,230 in options. So both of these cars have a long list of customizations, which will balloon the price of either car to north of a 6-digit price tag. Okay, now let's take a look back at the history of pricing between these two cars. Starting in the Corvette, in 1953, the MSRP was $3,490, and you can see that, predictably so, the prices continue to go up all the way through the generations. One thing I like to do is adjust for the rate of inflation on the original cars. So in 1953, the Corvette MSRP was $3,490. In 2019 dollars, that's $33,561 for a rate of inflation of 861.6%. Another interesting thing I like to do is take today's car and adjust it for the original car's year. So if you take the 2020 Corvette MSRP and adjust it to $1953, it equates to $6,124. Therefore, if you add up all the increases throughout the years, your total is 547.2%. Based on that and the inflation calculation we just did, the price increases in the Corvette are slower than the rate of inflation. Alright, here's the chart for the Shelby. In 1967, the price was $4,195, and again, the price kept going up, obviously. You can see that there's a huge price jump from 68 to 2007, and that's predictable given the gap in years between the two cars. So let's do the same inflation calculations we did with the Corvette. If you take the original 67 Shelby GT500 and adjust its price of $4,195, in 2019 it would cost $32,248 for a rate of inflation at 668%. On the flip side, if you take the 2020 Shelby and adjust it to $1967, it comes out to $9,483. If you add up all the increases through the GT500 life cycle, you get 980%. So contrary to the Corvette, the GT500 has outpaced the rate of inflation. Pretty interesting, huh? Next, let's get into an extra credit item, and that's the colors being offered in the Corvette and the GT500. In the Corvette, you get to choose from 11 different colors. You've got 3 lighter colors, 2 shades of red, a couple blues, 1 highlighter yellow, and an orange. One of my complaints about the C8 Corvette is the color palette because I don't feel like any of the colors are exciting. Most of them are carryovers from the C7, and I wish Corvette brought back an interesting color like a green from the C4 generation. What was it called? Polo green. On the flip side, Ford offers the GT500 in 11 colors as well. Similar to the Corvette, you've got a couple lighter colors, 2 different reds, an orange, and 3 different shades of blue. And finally, my favorite color, Grabber Lime. I'm a sucker for green color cars, and the Grabber Lime is not only cool, it's a historical color that was offered in Mustangs from the 60s and the 70s. If you want to play around with the colors, I recommend you go to the build and price tools on the Chevrolet and Ford.com websites. Alright, so that's the end of the comparison. Let's wrap up the video with an overview of the results and some final thoughts. In the engine department, the GT500 takes it with its monstrous 760 horsepower. 0 to 60, the Corvette takes that. Weight, Corvette predictably takes that as well. Power to weight and horsepower per dollar, GT500. Quarter mile, GT500. Top speed, the Corvette. Interior, GT500. Cargo space, GT500. And the price, Corvette comes in much cheaper at $14,000. Both the Shelby GT500 and the Corvette have been around for quite some time, and in its latest generations, they are in their best form. The Shelby GT500 continues its tradition with big horsepower, radical looks, and the cool factor of driving a Shelby Mustang still remains. On the flip side, the Corvette is now mid-engine, looks great, and with the change in platform, is now considered a true competitor to all other exotics like Ferrari, Lamborghini, and Porsche. These are probably the two hottest cars being released in 2019 going into 2020, and even though they may not be an apples-to-apples comparison, I think most buyers looking for a sports car are going to be looking at these. Me personally, I'll take the GT500. Why? Because I'm a simple guy. I like manual transmissions and cool exterior paint. And since neither the Shelby or the Corvette offer a manual, I'll take the Shelby in the coolest color available in either of these cars, grab or lime. Which one would you choose? Thanks for watching. Until next time, drive steady.